8 of the world's most powerful leaders gathered here to discuss global problems. And yet, the threat of violence means they're having to keep the world at bay.
Just prior to the G8 summit, CNN.com reported the head of Russia's Federal Bodyguard Service has warned of a plot by terrorist Osama bin Laden to assassinate George W. Bush. The LA Times reported U.S. officials were warned of a threat posed from the air by commercial airliners.
It's terrorists as well as protesters the Italian government fears, so anti-aircraft batteries were on standby at the airport.
Condoleezza Rice was present there, President Bush, Ari Fleischer, Karl Rove, President Bush's own family.
They were going to sleep on a boat so that a plane couldn't go into a building.
This floating resort will be home for 3 days for the G8 leaders, necessary for their safety.
Why is the Attorney General of the United States doing all his air travel by specially chartered jet?
The Justice Department cited what it called a threat assessment by the FBI and said Ashcroft has been advised to travel only by private jet for the remainder of his term.
And on the night before the attacks, the president may have slept more soundly, knowing surface-to-air missiles were placed on the roof of the Sarasota, Florida resort where he was staying. Not a typical security procedure at the time. Even as the first tower burned on every channel that morning, no one on the federal level who had received warnings all summer called New York to order an evacuation of Tower 2. No one ordered fighters to perform any timely defensive action against the remaining hijacked planes. No one responded adequately to the crisis.
There was a credible news report that day that Israeli officials at the embassy in London were warned about the impending attacks.
Let me just read this from the Associated Press newswire. Senior Israeli official says Scotland Yard told Israel minutes before explosions that it had received warnings of possible terror attacks.
I can't comment on that. I've never heard that, but all sorts of things will, I've no doubt, come out of the wash in speculation in the next few hours, but that is certainly not something of which I am aware. And if I may, I'm going to have to do a series of these broadcasts, so I'm probably going to have to come to a close now.
The CIA did indeed know about two of the hijackers more than a year and a half before the event.
In Washington, the CIA and FBI had joined forces and established a special bin Laden room at CIA headquarters. The CIA was also tracking bin Laden associates, who they believed had set up cells or operating units around the world.
They learned that suspected terrorists will travel to Malaysia in early January 2000.
Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi, I mean, these were two hijackers that went to Malaysia for an al-Qaeda summit in January 2000. The CIA learned about this meeting. It arranged for it to be under surveillance by the Malaysian Special Branch. It had photographs of the suspected al-Qaeda operatives.
Malaysian intelligence catches the men on camera and sends the surveillance to CIA headquarters. The spies identify Khalid al-Mihdhar and learn that Nawaf al-Hazmi is traveling with him.
It subsequently learned within days that two of them, al-Mihdhar and al-Hazmi, were headed for the United States. One, in fact, had entered, and the other had a multiple entry visa, al-Mihdhar.
The CIA obtains a photocopy of Mihdhar's Saudi passport and discovers he has a U.S. visa. It was considered interesting. The head of the agency's counterterrorism team will tell the commission.
It doesn't alert any other government agencies to the presence of these two hijackers in the United States. It doesn't tell the FBI, which is responsible for tracking terrorists in the United States.
Not only were al-Midhar and al-Hazmi at the meeting in Kuala Lumpur in January of 2000, in March of 2000, officials now confirm another nation told the CIA that al-Hazmi had flown from the Malaysian meeting to Los Angeles, California.
My question is, do you know why the FBI was not notified of the fact that an al-Qaeda operative now was known in March of the year 2000 to have entered the United States? Why was the CIA, why did the CIA not specifically notify the FBI?
Sir, if we weren't aware of it, when it came in the headquarters, we couldn't have notified them. Nobody read that cable in the March time frame.
Nobody read it. A FBI detailee who knew about this at the Counterterrorism Center at the CIA actually had drafted a cable to alert the FBI, his colleagues at the FBI, to the presence of, or the possible presence of Khalid al-Midhar, suspected al-Qaeda operative, having entered the United States, and that cable was squashed by superiors at the CIA. They did not pass it along.
In October 2000 came the attack on the USS Cole in Yemen. Then in January 2001, officials now say, the FBI identified a third man who attended that meeting in Kuala Lumpur, Taufik Atash Khalid, as a suspect in the Cole bombing. At that point, the CIA could have put al-Midhar and al-Hazmi and all others who attended the meeting in Malaysia on a watch list to be kept out of the U.S. It was not done. On July 4th, al-Midhar was able to re-enter the U.S. from a trip outside the country.
You know, these hijackers played a critical role. They intersected with almost all the other members of the plot, and the CIA never passed along the information. They never did anything that would have allowed U.S. law enforcement or other agencies to take the next step. That was a pretty stunning intelligence lapse, probably one of the biggest intelligence lapses of our time.
Remember the repeated claim that this was the work of clean skins, people unknown to the authorities? Well, it wasn't true.
There was a lot of spin on the day. That word clean skins appeared again and again on the day. It subsequently turned out that, in fact, the 7/7 plotters were not clean skins at all. We heard over and over again the phrase out of the blue. It subsequently turned out that at least one of the 7/7 plotters had been under some kind of surveillance.
Two of them were followed and photographed by MI5 and the police. The first time was on February the 2nd at Toddington Services on the M1. As the 10 o'clock news reported yesterday, this was the only photograph shown to the Intelligence and Security Committee, the ISC, for their first report. But the men were photographed again on February the 21st in Slough or Crawley, and further pictures were taken on March the 23rd in Slough and London. The BBC has obtained several of these. 16 months later, the men bombed the capital.
Only 2 weeks earlier, the threat level for the country had gone down. This was an intelligence failure. They weren't on our radar, so you can imagine we were chasing our tail to find out exactly what had gone on. You're only as good as what you know. What you don't know about, you can't plan for. You can only plan for the unthinkable.